So good to have you back. It's still the Good Morning Cross River, the Tuesday edition. Remember that yesterday we were supposed to have an interview in remembrance of the International Day of Remembrance of Slavery Victims and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And today we are so blessed to have the curator of Slave History Museum Calabar, Mrs. Ofuamaka Omaomi Joy Jao. Good morning, Madam Curator. So good to have you join us.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Now, since we are looking at history here, you are the curator of the Slave History Museum. Lead us through the path of a day like this being set aside to remember the slave victims.
All right. We know that for 400 years, slavery lasted for 400 years, and this evil trend, we saw a situation where about 15 million men, women, and children of African descent were moved from here, moved from their families, moved away from their homeland. They were trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean and commodified. They were sold as commodities on the open market, and their humanity was denied. So for these 400 years, we saw an evil trend that took place around the world. While the world washed, most Africans were moved away from here, and they went to the New World to face all kinds of hardship and untold suffering. So we see that the evil has also lasted. The legacies of the transatlantic slave trade is also seen in our today world, based on the fact that the roots of slavery lies on racism and prejudice, and it's staring at us to our very face. People are still being enslaved up till now. Slavery has not ended. People are still being carried away, shipped away from their various locations to different parts of the world for slavery. And we see that the blacks, the African descents, are the ones who are most affected, because racism is still prevalent in most countries in the world. So on the 25th of March, the United Nations set it aside to honor the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. And on this day, the United Nations says we should pay tribute to these people who, out of their own, not of their own violation, were taken away from where their original place of habitude and into a strange place. People who fought to keep themselves alive survived, and through all odds survived the evils and the barbarity that faced them. So United Nations sets this day aside to honor these people. And this year, the theme for the transatlantic slave.
So we'll get to the theme later. Let's look at why it's important for us to remember a day like this. I mean, for some people, it's a really painful memory to talk about. If you've ever visited the Calabar Museum here, merely looking at pictures that have already been carved and taken, it evokes some kind of emotion. So why is it necessary that we keep bringing back these memories, reminding ourselves of something that happened for hundreds of years?
Like I said earlier, it's very, very important, because the issues of slavery still stares at us every day. If you begin to draw the line from the time of colonial exploitation down to the times where people begin to face all kinds of social and economic disparities, down to modern day slavery. Like I said, you still have sexual exploitation, child abuse, you still have all forms of exploitation with children when it comes to war and all that.
These are some of the issues.
Yes, these are some of the issues that still face us today. It's not about the history, just talking about the history of the transatlantic slave trade or the history of slavery, but it's talking about our modern day, what happens today. Has slavery ended? We are still coming in terms with slavery in all forms. right from our homes to our schools to our society. Every corner you still see the legacies of slavery lying everywhere. That's why we need to keep talking about slavery. We need to keep educating people and come to a point where people should understand that their humanity should not be degraded for anything. People should come to a point where they value themselves, where there's equity, there's social justice. So we keep talking about slavery every day. That's why when you come to the Slave History Museum, like when you go to the museum, one of the functions of the museum is that you go to enjoy, you go to learn, and then you reflect and share knowledge. That's why when you come to the museum, we tell you, reflect on the issues, reflect on what you have seen. Is it right? Mm-hmm. How long will it continue? How do we end it?
Okay. Now, every year when we're trying to remember the slave victims, we put up, UN put up some themes to help, direct our focus. I love you, Madam Curator. Talk to us on the theme of this year's celebration.
The theme of this year's celebration is Fighting Slavery's Legacy of Racism Through Transformative Education. Now, why do we say education? We need to educate people on the need to work towards advancing equity, like I said earlier, and social justice for everybody, every person, both adults and children, mostly people of African descent. Like the white supremacy system still exists in our new world, the new world, let's call it that way. In America, in Europe, we still have people going through racism and the issues of racism every day. So we need to educate people and let them know that the goal is to help people see the world on a closer or ethical lens. Get them to see the world at that level, and then try to build a society where there's social justice, there's equity, there is right to freedom, and all that.
Right, you said something about education and slavery still being attainable in our today's society, despite the level of exposure we have. Can we call migration as one of those, slave routes, if we can use that language? Because it's now a thing for people to want to leave. It's now popularly termed Japa. But the criteria involved for you to leave, it's kind of like cumbersome. People are willingly submitting themselves to be used for different jobs out there, healthcare, and even down to plumbing and hand jobs. Is it something we can talk about? Can we see that as another form of slavery?
Well, if you look at it on the other level, and you find that even up till now, we are still under subjection.
Yeah.
Like I tell people, especially our youths, we are still under slavery. Whether you like it or not, those who perpetrated the acts of slavery were our leaders. They are chiefs who, due to their greed, lost their conscience, lost all forms of regards for humanity, and sold off their people. Now, if you begin to look at those things that were used to sell human beings, were so meager as mirror, bottle of gin, and gunpowder. So up till now, you still see that our leaders are still enslaving us. Why are people leaving the shores of this country to other countries? Because the rights to social, how would I call it, social justice, the right to the privileges you're supposed to have in the society is not given to you. People are still living below the line of poverty.
True.
And there is this desire to leave this place. You ask a small kid or a youth on the road, what do you think, what's your desire for tomorrow? All they want is to leave to America, leave to Europe, despite the things they face there. Now, when people begin to tell you the experiences they have, you find out that what they do over there, they can't do it here in Nigeria. A young man will leave Nigeria and go to America to wash dead bodies. And you cannot even afford to go to the mortuary. On a good day, when somebody dies, they follow me to the mortuary, nobody wants to go with you. And yet you go to Europe and wash dead bodies, make money, and even send home, and people even dupe you. You see on the social media, people cry and say, I wash dead bodies to make money, and then I send money home, and money is not being used. to where I
Yeah,
want
some
to.
might argue that okay, my job, I am a healthcare assistant, so I don't need to wash dead bodies, or I am a trained nurse, I'm a trained doctor, I have to work legally over there to still make ends meet.
That is
So
why,
they might differ in their comparisons.
that is why slavery is not just about talking about slavery. Is not just talking about history. Let's talk about what happens now and collect facts, collect experiences from people, what they face over there. Going abroad and the kind of work, the kind of job they do, where they find themselves, they are forced to stay there because there's virtually no hope in this nation for them. Most of them say there's no hope and Nigeria is hopeless. And so when you get there, it doesn't matter what kind of work, what kind of enslavement they put you through, you just want to go there, stay there. Now, what UN is trying to talk about honoring people is that when the black men or black slaves left here to the foreign world, they persevered. They were courageous people who tried to run away from where they found themselves. But unfortunately, these were worlds apart, rivers apart, they couldn't come back home. Black people tried to return because they didn't like the system. But now, our people, our young people, and even adults are giving themselves away to be enslaved. Not minding what they face there. They want to just go. They virtually tell you, it doesn't matter what it takes, I'm going to stay there.
Okay, now let's look at I want to pick up the issue of honoring them according to the UN. Now, beyond just honoring them, is it that UN does not have a plan for compensation? Is there a compensation plan for those who were forcefully taken out of their fatherland to be used, to be abused and all of that? Or do we just talk of honoring them?
That compensation thing is a big debate, because when you begin to talk about compensation, who do you compensate? Who do you not compensate? Are you compensating the blacks who are there, or are you compensating Africa for taking able-bodied men? For 400 years, you left Africa at a standstill in a dark time. It was one of the darkest times in human history, worst times of human history. And who are you going to compensate? Are you compensating Nigeria for leaving us for 400 years and taking away the source of our livelihood? When you come to the Slave History Museum, after you get through the dark room into the times where you have the history of the ancient African arts in Nigeria, and we tell people that if they had left us for 400 years, based on what we have seen or what has been researched and excavated and researched, we had our own form of civilization before the white men came in here. Yes, in our artwork, in our technology, we had all kinds of civilization. So if they had left us for 400 years, Africa would have been at the top of the world. So who do you compensate? Where do we start from? It's a debate that goes on in the United Nations.
So
It's ongoing, right?
It's ongoing.
So how does the Cross River, Slavery Museum intend to imbibe the theme for this year's slave trade, transatlantic slave trade Remembrance Day? Because you have a year to exemplify the theme and ensure that education reaches even the interior and most interior parts of the state. Everyone should have knowledge about slave trade. How do you intend to actually practicalize this?
Fortunately, UN has made the celebration for slavery into 3 parts for throughout the year. We celebrate Slavery Day in March, we celebrate in August, and we celebrate in December. Unfortunately, in March, 25th of March exactly, we couldn't do anything because of the situation in the country. We had already sent letters to schools to come into the museum for different kinds of debates, quiz competition, and sightseeing and all that. But unfortunately, because of what happened recently, schools were closed down, and most children are home now.
Yeah.
We couldn't get them, so we shifted the celebration to August, I think 2nd of August. So normally we have activities lined up for children and schools. We try to talk about the issues of slavery. We have painting competition, we have dance competition, dramatic and debate competition.
Okay. So is this something that was spanned over a year? Or is
Yes, it spans over a year.
Okay, Madam Curator, do we still have some existing slave trade routes in Calabar, either documented or not documented?
For now, we don't have a documented slave trade route, but we know that the Slave History Museum is the exact point. We call it one of the barricades, one of the barricades that was set up by the white men. And fortunately for us, our then governor, His Excellency Donald Duke, made that place a museum. But that stands as one of the evidence or one of the legacies of slave trade here in Cross River. But to my knowledge and to our knowledge as museum practitioners, we know that there are other slave routes in Cross River State, because like we know that 31% of the slaves that moved out of Africa moved away from this very point. They were brought in from the hinterlands to Cross River, where you have the Marina Beach. And we know that it wasn't the journey to that place took about months and days to get there. There were also some points where the slaves and the slave masters and the middlemen stayed. There are also some warehouses where they kept the slaves, which we have heard about within Cross River State. So right now we are trying to do research, find out those slave routes, the paths they passed, the different places they stopped to take rest and eat and all that, the point where the slave masters had middlemen staying and living around the northern part, the central part of Cross River State, because they came in from the parts like different areas, like from Igbos, from the Ibido lands and all that to Cross River State. So right now we are still calling out for researchers and people to come and help us to find these slave routes.
Out of curiosity though, what do you intend to do with this route when you eventually find them? Because some will tell you let sleeping dogs lie.
Yes, because it's like we said, the museum is a place where you research, where you collect and keep archival materials or documented materials for future reference. And we know that we have a museum in Badagry. They have a slave route, a vine slave route. They have slave houses. They have artifacts that could really discern that this was exactly where the slaves stayed. But in Cross River, we know that Cross River, we know the main point, and we don't have any slave route. When we have visitors coming into the museum, they ask us, what else? Is this all? We've had so many stories. There's history talking about the slaves moving in from the hinterland down here. Where do we locate them? And people want to see, especially these descents, African descents who come in here, they want to trace where they came from. So we need to trace that slave route. The former curator of Old Residency Museum, Mr. Adaka, Adelia Sunday Adaka, Adelia said there is a slave warehouse in Yako. Somebody hinted him, but we've not been able to go there.
And the chiefs could not pinpoint a location.
Maybe industrialization and a whole lot of activities must have.
Or maybe there is a current slave market and everybody is trying to guard their resources.
Yes, there is a slave market at Akpabuyo. Beach, yes, where they have the trade by barter. Every Saturday we have trade by barter in Esumba Beach. Was a slave market where the slaves, most of the slaves who were not bought here, were moved down there. When they move you from Marina Resort through the waters, through the smaller boats to Esumba Beach, then the ship would bait at the entrance of the Atlantic Ocean, and some of the slaves were also sold at Esumba Beach. So we have one of that. But what we need to know is the routes they came in from the hinterlands. What's the route? And funny enough, one thing about is kind of mysterious is that slave routes are easy traceable if you are determined to trace it. There are always traces. When you do archaeological work, you find traces of slave routes all around the society. But Nobody is serious about it.
Like I would say, maybe globalization has taken over.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, let's get your message on a day like this. That the UN decided to set out to remember the slave victims and a lot of potentials. Like I did say when we did the opening about the book written by Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Let's get your message to those watching us, and also how we can trace those
slave routes. What we as individuals, we might be
can
even living around one of those slave routes, but
we
since we don't know and we don't have the
Yes.
archaeological eyes to see certain things, we might just see it as some historical marks or something. Yeah.
So, Madam Curator, talk to us.
Funny enough, all around Cross River States, there are archaeological findings in Cross River States that dates back to centuries. And Calabar is such a beautiful city that when the rain falls, it washes the soil and you see those archaeological findings in the ground. I've been purporting to go to areas and I see pot sheds and I'll scream, I say, don't throw it away, don't scatter it. Those are archaeological findings, and we've done a lot of excavation to get those things. So they are easily traceable when people are conscious of the fact that these archaeological findings defines us as defines our person, defines our humanity, defines where we are coming from. Now, the message of the transatlantic slave trade and the remembrance of the victims of the transatlantic slave trade is that we need to stand together against racism. We need to build a world in which everyone and everywhere can live lives of dignity and human rights. We must make an inclusive society based on dignity and the rights to live a good life everywhere.
Thank you so very much, Curator of Slave History Museum Calabar, Mrs. Ufomaka Umaomi Joy Jero. Thank you very much for your time. We look forward to August to host you again on the show.
August 2nd.
Yeah. So stay with us, don't go away. We'll go on a